Hey, welcome back everyone. So in this video, I'm drawing Spider-Man and Hobgoblin. I want to talk about stylistic choices in comic art. So with this one, I was going to go into it with more of a forgiving attitude of like, I'll let this be a little bit more stylized, a little more cartoony. I know these are subjective in the way that you might understand them versus the way that I mean them. But basically, I'm just saying, like, instead of that very rendered style that I like to do, there's times I like to do a little bit more of a cartoon style, and I like let basically the coloring do more of the work versus dark rendering, lots of heavy shadows. I still had shadows in here, but just not as much, and I keep the rendering to a minimal. The reason I do this is because I notice a big time difference in the time spent on a particular piece, and it always makes me kind of think like, oh, should I switch gears and go more for this cartoon-like style? I don't do it as much, but when I do it, again, I see the piece get done a lot quicker. It's a lot easier for me to draw. Obviously, that's why it's faster. I don't know that it comes out better. I think that I typically prefer the more rendered style and the more the cumbersome version of what I do, where I spend more time deliberating on things and I ultimately change more things to get to what I'm after. Where this, again, I let some of the faults kind of lie. I almost let the forearm stay ridiculously long, and you'll see I end up changing. A few things, but I had to flatten the layer, change it, and paint over top. It was still doable, but it was because I was actually going to let a few things just be. Like I feel like that's part of it. Like I see some of these styles out there where they're so exaggerated in proportions and wild, and there's a certain freedom there, and I admire that, and I kind of I'm a little bit envious at times. So when I sit there and I spend 20 hours on a piece and I share it and I still see flaws and people still manage to call me out on things, and I'm like, wow, maybe I shouldn't have went for something that looked as realistic, because it tends to be when things are less realistic. And again, these terms are really I have a hard time using these terms because of what we're talking about, but when you let things be really exaggerated in the style, I feel like there's less people can really say about it. Like, hey, his arm's really wild. Well, yeah, it's all really wild. Look at the exaggerations that the person's using. So again, to me, that seems like it almost becomes more of an issue when you let style be really strong in the work, that people are either going to just go, yeah, I like that style, or I don't. And it becomes that kind of thing, not the critiquing of, well, a hand doesn't really gesture that way, and if you used more flow, and I think that people tend to do that more when it's more realistic, because it almost calls out to that at that point. And again, always comment in these videos. Let me know what you think. I'm just sharing my thoughts on these ideas. But really, again, what pulls me back to this is the fact that I know that I could do a book a heck of a lot. I mean, I could easily do a book on a deadline with this way of drawing and inking. I think that even by the time I colored it, it was about 6 hours long. So minus the color, it was probably only about 4 hours, because I kind of took the wrong steps in the coloring and, the background, this and that. But so I don't know. It's still not like that's great timing, but it's a lot better than what would happen if I was really trying to overly critique this and make it into a more, again, realistic, I don't know if that's the right word, realistic style. So a more rendered style. So again, I think that it's helpful to play around with these ideas. And also, if you delve into these different style choices, and this is where I think it's really helpful to look at different comic artists and pay attention to how they make the exaggerations with posturing of the body, hand gesture. Hand gestures is a big one. There's certain artists out there, and I'm not going to call it any names, but they do really amazing work. And if you zero in on the hands, some of the hands will be like super simplistic. I think it's beautiful. I think it's a great idea. But it's funny because until I really zeroed in on that and paid attention to it, I was just like impressed by the entirety of the piece. And then you'll realize some people take some shortcuts. Some of them even do it on hands. I've even seen a few artists that take some real shortcuts on faces. It's not that everything is a shortcut. It's just they know where to pull their punches and when to make those stylistic choices. So again, I think that's really helpful to look at different comic artists and then delve into their style a little bit. Take a little piece of that puzzle and try to draw it, and see how much easier it is to use a stylistic choice for certain things. Some do really well with their shapes of shadows. They utilize those shapes of shadows in a way that is effective and has to be a major time saver for them. So it's just neat to pay attention to that. But the other thing is that when you do this, to allow yourself to, not be hindered by it, not look at it like, oh, if I draw this way, then no one's going to like my work. Yeah, I think the amazing thing about this is that there's lots of different styles out there, and there's lots of people that are going to admire the way that you implement all sorts of stylistic choices. And here's the other thing, and I'll bring it to a close. I actually think this is one of the things that will help people fight back on this whole, not to sound negative, but this whole AI crap. It's like the market is getting flooded with a bunch of AI art. And I feel like one of the things that could save people, besides the obvious one of drawing more on paper and inking on paper, traditional work is a big saving point, is also your style. The more style heavy your work is, I feel like that's kind of your way to fight back. Like that's your calling card, that's your signature, and that in turn delineates you from all these copycat imitation softwares basically, and these programs. So I don't know, just something to think about. But let me know what you think about the work. More on the way soon, and thanks for watching.